Starting your own practice is hard for many chiropractors. It's riddled with both struggles and successes. But here at the Chiropractic Philanthropist, we make it easy by having chiropreneurs and entrepreneurs share their struggles and lessons learned in life and business so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. And now here's your host, Dr. Ed Osborne.
How amazing would it be if you could practice because you want to, not because you have to? Learn how to improve your cash flow and increase your passive income now. Go to moneyripples.com or find their podcast, The Chris Miles Money Show, to learn more. All right, T-Speed listeners, I have an incredible guest today, and that is actually Dr. Nona Djavid. Nona, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here.
I think we've been wanting to get this done for probably about a year. So yeah, I'm incredibly excited to have you on the show too. And almost in our pre-chat too, I think we're going to have a little bit of maybe a spicy conversation here today. So for I know you, but I mean, and I've been following you for a long time. So for the listeners and the viewers who don't know you, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you're stepping up as a leader in our profession today.
Okay. Well, without having to take you all the way to my childhood, I'm just kidding. I won't bore you with the details of it. But I moved to this country when I was 16 years old, and I didn't speak a word of English. And I didn't really have any desire to get into entrepreneurship. However, I did experience poverty at a kind of an extreme level, because you can imagine my parents moved here and they brought their entire life savings, which in the United States will last you a month and a half. And so a month and a half later, we are in low-income housing. I no longer have my friends. I've been thrown into high school at the time. And so I found my only way out of that situation to be like getting a job, just like any other 16-year-old would think, let me just get a job and find out. And so that's what I did. I got a job at a fast food place. And long story short, one of the times that I was serving the most popular girl in my high school, like the cheerleader, the prettiest, the most blonde, like the opposite of me practically, walks in. And I serve her food, and then she left some pennies for me when she left. And I'm 16 and I was humiliated. It was like the worst experience of my life, my 16-year life. But it also turned out to be such a good turning point for me. And I turned that into, okay, and that day I quit my job and I started a tutoring company. That tutoring company ended up paying for not only the things I wanted as a teenager, but then later I went on to study at Berkeley, paid for my school. I went to chiropractic school. I kind of continued that whole journey and became a chiropractor. And I've had one other job other than that fast food place, which was work for another chiropractor, which, as you can imagine, didn't last very long. And then again, sort of long story short, I decided that I was going to go out on my own, which I did. My practice was really successful. Within the first 3 years, I built a $1 million practice, but I also completely burnt out. There was so many different reasons why I burnt out. But ultimately that led me to create a practice that was designed to support my life and not the other way around. So I designed my life, decided what I wanted to do. I wanted to work part-time. I wanted to get paid in cash. I didn't want to take insurance. I wanted to travel. I wanted to be able to step away from my practice. I didn't want to be a slave to my practice. And so I made so many different changes inside of my clinic to be able to create a part-time $1 million cash-based practice. And so now, full circle, I teach other chiropractors to implement those same things so that they can start to work on their business instead of just being a slave to it and working inside of it constantly.
I love that. And there's so many doctors who really need that, that guidance, because I talk to docs all the time, like every day. I know a lot of docs. I've been a chiropractor for where I was licensed chiropractor for 14, 15 years. So that was always my struggle, is like, okay, I hit that high level of, okay, I hit this many patient visits and we're crushing it and we're in the top of our management program, but what's next? It's like, it was always like more and more and more, which seemed to just, there was nothing, I couldn't scale me.
Yeah.
And so I love where the conversation's going here, but I want to pull back or pull something out from the 16-year-old you. And that's like, what was the greatest lesson you learned from starting your business as that tutoring business when you were 16? What's the greatest lesson you learned?
Okay, I'm so glad you asked that. I actually just got published in Forbes with my story of how I did that. And that was it was like top 3 lessons that I shared on Forbes. And the biggest one I would tell you is that there is no one coming to save you. There's absolutely nobody coming to save you, and you have to start taking responsibility for the direction of your life. You can no longer play a victim not that you no longer, you really should never, ever play a victim to a previous story or into your past. And a little bit of a backstory, if you want. When we moved here to the US, we were dropped off obviously at like LAX here in Southern California. And it's a 3-hour drive to where my grandparents lived. And imagine, we don't speak a word of English. We have no idea what a taxi is, because that stuff doesn't exist in a third world country. It's just such a different world. And we were expected to get picked up at the airport. And it's like 2 a.m. or it was like midnight. And nobody came for us, And so that was the first like seed, which is kind of a traumatic experience. However, that led to, you know what, I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to figure out what a cab is. I'm going to figure out how to communicate and get somebody to take us to where we need to go to. And then that carried on to this big philosophy of like, you are it. This is it. No one's coming to save you, in a really powerful way, not in a depressing way, but like in a really powerful way. No one's coming to save you. You are responsible for the life that you have created so far. And your past does not equal your future, meaning you're also responsible for what you're about to create in the future. So I think that was the biggest thing.
This is great, because and anyone who's a very, subscribed follower, listener of this podcast will know that I ask the same questions pretty much every time I have an interview. And I've done that for like the last 5-6 years, but we're really going through that entire process without even me lobbing the questions at you. It's like, what is the struggle? What did you learn from that? What are some words of meaning? And you've kind of nailed all of those right away. But I was on a Clubhouse, and if anyone, maybe you could even speak to Clubhouse in the conversation there. I don't know if you're using it, but I was on Clubhouse this morning, and so they pulled me to this stage, and I rarely ever say anything. But I was like, they were talking about success principles and things like this. And I kind of got a little bit triggered, and I'm like, there's so many people who say they're committed to success, but they're really not committed. They're committed to wanting the results, but they're not committed to doing the work to actually get there. So I love your story where it's like, no, it's like, I literally didn't speak English when we landed here. Like I had to start from scratch. And I'm sure that you put a lot of time, a lot of effort and work, not just to get the basic skill set to get to the $1 million a year business or multiple $1 million a year business you're at, but now also how to help other people do the same. Is that right? So now you're actually coaching and mentoring people in this, or like in this process.
Yeah. So coaching and mentoring, I have a mastermind group of chiropractors where we walk you through, the steps to take to create some version of a part-time $1 million cash-based practice. Because when I say some version, there's a reason for that. If you have ever, and I know a lot of chiropractors, we've all done the practice management groups. We've joined multiple things. We've learned things. They've been successful, but also mostly we've been kind of like they try to fit you into a box, right? Like, here's the recipe, just follow the recipe. And so sometimes you end up so far away from who you are, what you want to create. You end up just like what happened to me, which was I followed the recipe. I was the A student in these practice management groups. I was coaching the coaches, And then, and it was, my practice was successful, but it was not fulfilling. It wasn't what I wanted. And so when I created the mastermind, I decided that's the gap I want to fill. That's the hole I want to fill for chiropractors, because that's what I experienced for myself. So I say a version of a part-time $1 million cash-based practice, meaning you want to drop insurance. Okay, there's stuff in that. You want to communicate well so that you can sell cash plans. You don't have to depend on insurance. There's stuff in there. You want to work less. There's stuff in there. You want to make more money. There's stuff in there. So the numbers don't matter as much as ultimately the lifestyle that you want to create. I do want to go back to what you said, because I would have been triggered by that too, of like results, and I want this. And it's like, sometimes you have to ask people, and I don't know if you experienced this, Ed, I'm sure you do with all the people that you coach with your program. I want this, but then what are you willing to do what it takes, whether it's an investment of money, whether it's time or effort? Are you willing to do whatever it takes? And 9 out of 10 times the answer is yes. But in reality, we just fall back into this old paradigm, right? Of who you actually are internally. And you don't end up, doing what is required to do to get you to that point that you want. So I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because that's definitely a pet peeve of mine. Everybody wants things. I want a 6-pack, but am I willing to eat a salad and chicken every day?
Yeah. And I'm human. I'm flawed. I get it, and I have this discussion sometimes with our coaches in our program, and I'm like, they'll know that I get frustrated with this. It's like, what is going on? Why won't they do what I tell them to do? And then sometimes I'm just like, maybe just not everyone's cut out for this. And this kind of brings me full circle. I shouldn't say full circle. It's like trending right now. This brings me to a question that I have for you is, before we get on this discussion today, and I mentioned to you that it's really, like, I acknowledge you, first of all, for, coming and stepping up, but also, like, it's really hard for me to get women chiropractors, women entrepreneurs on this podcast. Like, if I look back on 360 some episodes, it's probably, I think I'm guessing 70, but it's probably more like 50. It's such a small number, and it's not for the lack of inviting. So is there a dark side to the entrepreneur, like being the feminine entrepreneur, the feminine chiropractor business person? Is there a dark side that I'm missing here?
Gosh, are you sure you can ask that
Bring
question?
it. I want to hear it, because I'm a single dad now. Like, I'm a solo dad, so I'm starting to get a taste of it. But
yeah, I feel that I'm going to get heat for this conversation, but that's okay. Yeah. Ed, when I first started part-time $1 million cash-based practice, my target was from a consulting perspective. I want to help women in practice be able to create a part-time $1 million cash-based practice so that they can be with their children, because that was a big piece for me. I want this quality of life for my kids and with my husband and everything else. However, I found that, even though that was in my heart, and those are kind of steps that I took, and I niched my audience, and I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I didn't feel, that audience really stepped up to want that, to have the desire to have not a Mickey Mouse operation, but something that is absolutely like you got to put your big girl pants on and run the business and have it be absolutely profitable, where you can pay and support and contribute and do all of those things. I didn't have enough of a population that would take that offer, or that was willing to go there. I'm not saying they're not chiropractors, female chiropractors that are out there that are successful, or entrepreneurs that are out there and successful. I'm just saying that was my personal experience. Another thing I experienced was that there was this lack of support by other female chiropractors that I've experienced. Yeah. And I'm going to get hated for this, but this is just my personal experience, that male chiropractors have supported me throughout this journey, both as a chiropractor and as well as stepping into and transitioning in this identity of from a chiropractor into, I've been asked on stages. I know there's like this conversation and in the chiropractic world that women are not being asked on the stage, that women are not being given a stage, that they have to provide their own stage, that they have to work harder. All of those things might be true. For me, my personal experience was completely different. So my audience has been shifted towards, as a matter of fact, most of my mastermind members are male clients. I feel I have a good balance of the masculine and the feminine, and I can do all of those. But sort of, let's go back to the actual question that you asked me. Okay. So why is this? I think it's such a multifaceted and we probably don't have enough time to talk about it. Issue, but I think one of the things is that the female entrepreneur, the female chiropractor, oftentimes is held back by so many of the thoughts that collectively the society has given to us. I mean, me personally, my background is so different than any other female chiropractor here in the US who's American or white or whatever. However, I think all of us go through where there's this expectation of running the household, of, taking care of the kids, of cooking, you have all of those things to do. And then on top of it, running a business that is profitable. But at the same time, we are holding ourselves back. It kind of goes back to, the number one lesson you learn is you're ultimately responsible. Do females have to work harder to build the same kind of business than a male counterpart? Absolutely. I believe that. Mm-hmm. However, it doesn't make it impossible. No. Can you work smarter? Do you have to overcome certain self-limiting thoughts? I'll give you an example. As a female, you have to overcome the thought of, I have to do everything. I have to take care of everybody. If you believe that, you're not likely to delegate. You're not likely to hire a bunch of staff that takes care of your stuff, which means you're going to cap in terms of how many patients you're going to see, how much and then guess what? You're going to burn out unless you have a super part-time, sort of like I go in the office, I see a few patients type of thing, then yeah, you can kind of maintain that lifestyle and momhood and all the things that comes with being a female in general, not even a mom.
Yeah. So it's almost like a letting go of those feelings. I could see this, again, because to a small degree, right? I can empathize, I think, because being someone who's transitioned into being a solo dad, full-time entrepreneur, right? I'm a full-time provider for the entire family still. And I've had to change my life, my entire life, but it's making it work. Right. But then there's still feelings where I'm like, am I, supporting my boys and am I present with them enough? And am I supporting my clients? Am I, in marketing and making sales? And so there's that dichotomy, that real dichotomy inside. For me, I imagine it must be the same for women who are entrepreneurs as well, that are mothers or supporting people in their family. It must be very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's definitely a juggling act. You have to get rid of the idea that there's this thing called a balanced life, that you can have all of your, I don't know if I can curse on here, all of your crap together, you have to let go of that idea. And then like you nailed it, basically, like you're with your boys, I was given this analogy by a mentor of mine, and I said, well, how do I manage all of this? Because I have all these businesses, I have my kids, I've got my husband. How do I balance it? What she told me is there's all these cards on the ground, right? One is like, you're a wife. The other one's you're a friend. The other one is you're a mom to your kids. The other one's this business. This is the other business. And you cannot balance all the cards, but what you can do is you pick up the motherhood card or the fatherhood card, and that's when you're with your boys. And you literally give 100% of your present time consciousness to that card or to your kids or whatever, 110% of it in that moment. And then you put it back down. And then you grab the other card, that's this business. That's where time blocking really helps too. But that idea helped me, that I can't balance and juggle all these cards in two hands. But what I can do is I can grab one, give it my full attention, drop it down, grab another one.
Take the guesswork out of your practice. Achieve certainty with the Insight scanning system. Chiropractors can now analyze a patient's condition more accurately, communicate findings more effectively, while allowing both the doctor and patient to track the effectiveness of your care. Find out how Insight can help grow 30% in as little as 3 months by filling out the practice survey assessment, a $149 value. Head to insightcla.com/PSA. The event code is TCP.
I love the concept of the part-time $1 million practice, or we could just say the part-time $1 million business. Mm-hmm. I definitely teach people, or like I like to coach people. This is what we do inside of the online space, but it's the only difference being it's like not location dependent, right? It's more like it's online. But I noticed too, and maybe do you notice this in practice? Is there moments where you're like sprinting in practice to, like in a sense of marketing and sales and really working on and in your business, and then maybe you coast for a little bit and then you sprint again? Or is it all just this consistent amount of time and effort that you put into your business to keep it growing and running?
I feel like the idea, and this is what I have done with all of my businesses, or at least attempted to do, the ideal way of doing it is you put in all this chunk of time, like for clients where they first start with you to take their business online, right? Like, or add a stream of income online. The idea is to put in this chunk of time and effort, and then have something that if you have the systems in place and you're communicating the right way, you've fine-tuned everything, then ideally this machine is sort of running itself. Right. So I was definitely able to create that in when I was in practice. And then as my businesses are evolving and as the world is evolving, you get to pivot and then you get to change those things, but then continue to improve upon it, improve your systems as things come up. But that massive amount of effort really goes in at the initial portion of building that business or creating a systematized, profitable business.
And so if there's docs right now who are listening or watching, like what's the best way that they can either connect with you, or like, is there something like a URL, like a website or anything that you would like to share with them so that they can, get a little bit more information on how they can really just design their life, not to a balanced, life and business, but to a way that actually works for them?
Yeah, they can go to my website, which is my first name, my last name.com. I'm all over social media. They could connect with me on Facebook or Instagram. But also specific for chiropractors, I run a master class that's completely free. It's 5 days, and I kind of walk them through the journey of what I went through and give them practical things that they can do to go part-time or to go cash or to, increase their profit and their bottom line. And for that, they can go to milliondollarchiros.com.
Perfect. So if you're watching in the live, we'll drop that in the comments down below. But also if you're listening, head over to our website at thechiropracticphilanthropist.com, and we'll have a webpage dedicated to our discussion with Dr. Nona today and all the links and resources she's provided. I'd strongly suggest that all docs do go and check this out. So what would you say to someone like me, who maybe doesn't have a complete understanding of the feminine entrepreneur, chiropreneur's journey, and how would I get more female energy onto something like this, onto our podcast?
That's a good question, putting me on the spot. How can you get more of that? I think I don't want to say you because you said it's not for the lack of invite. I know that because I know you work with female coaches. You have, I took your program, you have a female coach that's wonderful. And so you are working with those, hashtag boss ladies, if you would. I think that do for me what other male chiropractor entrepreneur, who has a stage, who has, they sought me out. they looked for me when I was a baby in starting this business, and they were like, you have something to say and it seems important. And I don't trust that you're going to flop on my podcast, or I trust that you're not going to like completely ruin my podcast or say something that's not, helpful. Or they gave me the stage when it really meant something to me. And so I was able to propel forward within that. I think seeking those opportunities that you can provide for female entrepreneurs. And that's not to say that you haven't done it, but that's really the only thing I can think of. I think that female entrepreneurs we're going to have to put our big girl pants on and get out there and claim these opportunities as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think sometimes, and again, even just based on this conversation, it's been incredibly enlightening for me, is that, look, we all have our stuff. We all have our shit, right? So, I think everyone's trying to balance their stuff. And then it's just like, look, here's my values. And if this doesn't fit within my values and where I can dedicate the limited amount of time that I have, then it's just a pass. It's a no, thank you. So maybe I just need to make it more attractive. Hey, can I get 10 minutes instead of an hour? Sometimes maybe people think there's a huge time commitment here, and it's not always as long a conversation as like we have today. So what I want to do is actually, I do want to put you in our TCP time machine. So our famous team is TCP. You ready for this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, here it goes. I haven't done this for a while. Okay, so I'm going to put you in the TCP time machine. I'm going to send you back to a younger version of yourself. Now, this is right after you graduated chiropractic college. Now, you have all the life experience and the knowledge that you have today. What would you say to that younger self?
I would say to trust yourself and chill the F out. Like, you don't have to be so hardcore. Everything is going to work out the way that it's supposed to work out.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Do you find a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, don't trust themselves?
I think that we all as human beings to some level don't trust ourselves fully, because if we did, then we would have all of our goals and, the house that you want, the car that you want, because you trust yourself to take those really big risks. So, but more so when you're younger and you're right out of school, can I do this? Can I borrow money? And can I build a business? And can I, there's so many questions. So I would trust myself more and I would risk more. I'd spend more money.
Yeah. Every time I take a risk, I grow.
Yes.
Right. Personally or professionally. Right.
It's the only way to grow.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So final question. Basically, if we were to ask you, like, what is on your nightstand? Like, what are you reading right now or listening to, as like some people listen to audiobooks or podcasts, or who are you following? Any one of these three resources that you could drop on a doctor right now.
I am reading right now, and I've been reading it for months now. It's a super thin book, and it's called U Squared. Have you read it?
No.
Oh my gosh, it is so good. Like, every sentence is so intentional. And I'll just give you the big picture. The big picture idea, and it's by this guy named Price Pritchett, I think.
Oh, yeah, I know this. I know of him.
Yeah, so he has this really thin book, U Squared. And the idea behind it is that you don't have to grow incrementally. Like, you have the potential to actually have massive growth. All you have to do is, going back to our conversation, to take more risk, to actually participate more, to engage in more adventurous ideas and experiences. And I love that idea, because any chiropractor you talk to, what do they say? Or any business owner, they'll say, 10% growth, 20% growth, 30% growth. But they can't understand, or they don't have this perception that you can literally 10x it possibly in 6 months, in 3 months, So that's just the idea that that's a possibility is just blowing my mind, and how you can tweak your mind in order to have that be real to you.
Yeah, it's almost like the cliche when you ask people, especially if they're not very clear, like, what would you like to see as a result? They go, I'd love to double my business or double my sales, but they don't really realize the full potential that they have inside of them to actually increase their business. And I always say this too, and it was true for me, is like, once I hit a specific number, it was a hop and a skip to triple and, quadruple my business after that. So yeah, awesome. I love that advice. So I wanted, I want to thank you for being on the podcast today and for giving back. This has been a really incredible conversation. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved being on here, and I loved all the topics we covered. Thank you.
Want more certainty with your x-rays? Want to streamline your workflow more so you can see more patients? Or just want to limit your liability with x-rays? Get a second opinion. Dr. Cliff Tao is a chiropractic radiologist and reads diagnostic imaging studies for all chiropractors. His professional, highly detailed reports are provided next business day with stat reports available same day. Head to clifftao.dcdacbr.com for more information. That's clifftao.dcdacbr.com today. You can also find us on Facebook and LinkedIn.
So you've heard the struggles, you've heard the successes, and this episode is done. But there's still so much more to come and so much more to learn. Head on over to thechiropracticphilanthropist.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive free practice building tips and strategies, including how to market your practice with your very own podcast and so much more. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Chiropractic Philanthropist.